All right. So now we want to take our layer 3. We want to select everything, and we want to turn it on for render. Let's just take a look and make sure that we're getting everything that we want or expect. There's, a bit of a chance I need to tweak the kind of the lightness values in the whites for the plastics, and I can either do that in Blender or I can do that in Photoshop after the render. In this case, I think I'm just going to wait. The plastics that I have that I scanned are far more yellow than the playfield, and I equalized them as best I could without pulling any tone out of the whites especially, and I might just leave them. I mean, they aren't atypical for what you would see on a Seawitch these days. So, all right, then we render, and I'll be back. Okay, here's our render of all our layer 3 stuff, but one thing that I see that I don't like is we lost all the hot stamping on our bumpers. It's just been a material mistake on my part. So we can go back into materials and figure out what went wrong. Looks like our color space wasn't non-color. There it is. Okay, so instead of taking the all the time to re-render everything just to fix that small element, you can Control B and then just box select an area that you want to render again, and then just make sure crop to render region is off, because it's going to give you this full canvas with only this rendered. That way it's really easy to drop right in Photoshop to fix it up. So we'll render that out. Okay, I have a rendered out texture for layer 3. I have a rendered out texture for layer 4. And so now what we're going to do is export the meshes so that we can bring everything into Visual Pinball. So here we go. We're going to go to layer 3, and we're going to select everything. We're going to duplicate everything and move it all to the workshop. Okay. We're going to turn off layer 3 just to avoid any mistakes, and take a look at what's actually here. We have bumper caps, we have some posts, we have our plastics, we have our plunger guide, and we have this piece of the spinner. Now, this was just kind of an experiment. I don't know if I'm going to use this or not, but it doesn't go with everything else, but it does get mapped to layer 3's texture. So we're going to select everything, project from view. There we go, that should do it. And then one other thing that I did was I went in and did some of the drop targets, and this is really kind of an experiment. Because of the shape of the drop targets, that overhanging lip on the top, I kind of have a fear that we're not going to be able to project from this angle, because that is going to project in the wrong place if you look at this at a lower angle, like desktop view. So I'm going to duplicate these. I'm going to move these to the workshop as well. We're going to give it a shot, see if it works. If it doesn't, fine. We'll have to set up a separate camera and get these. Thankfully, they're not very reflective, and so it's really not going to break the illusion to do those from a different camera angle. So let's add those to the pile of things that we're mapping from this viewpoint. Okay. And then all the things that we want to be together in one mesh get selected like so. Not that. So up to this point, we want all of these to be our layer 3 mesh. And then, because these all share object data, we're going to select all of them. We're going to go to Relations, Make Single User, Object and Data, Selected Objects. So now those should all be able to map individually. And we should also be able to export them individually. So we'll call this like drop target 2. So if we go into Visual Pinball, should be able to just grab, now I have this old layer 3 in here from a previous build, saving me a little time. So you would just, copy and paste one of your previous meshes to do this. Make sure that's visible. So layer 3 is getting all -3 in the depth bias. That's how I'm stacking them and keeping them organized. So layer 1 had -1, layer 2 had -2, and upwards. That way transparency works correctly across the board. I left a little bit of disable lighting off, just so if somebody wanted to use the day-night slider or something, they can affect it a little bit anyway. So this should work. I probably need to mess with the material. I think these are going to come up looking a little bit faded. Yeah, but there they are. I mean, it's starting to look like a complete project here. Yeah, excellent. All right, so I'll mess with this material a little bit, see why that's why we're not getting a nice black on those. But that's easy to solve. That's just a Visual Pinball thing. So for now, we'll just call this layer 3 drop target 5. Bring it in. There it is. And then we just want to make sure that it's part of the collection of layer 3 things so that its texture changes along with the other layer 3 textures when the lights go on. Of course, this will be animated later. We do want to turn on reflections for drop targets, though, because I didn't render the reflections for those onto our playfield. Yeah, looks screwy. It isn't quite as bad as I thought it would be. I might leave it. We'll see. So some of the weird artifacting down here that you see is a Visual Pinball problem where they have the playfield still set to render static. So you get black edges around just about everything that you have transparency on in the playfield. Really frustrating. So I will try not to harp on that too much as we go, but at least you know what you're looking at. And truly, I just don't know that there's a good workaround. All right, so there's that, and then we just do the exact same thing for layer 4 stuff. So we can get rid of all the layer 3 stuff. Here's everything from layer 4. Duplicate it. Send it to the workshop. Turn off layer 4 for safety. So then we can take this and we can map it, but we want to double check because we know a lot of these things are sharing object data. So look how little actually came over here. So I think with all of those things selected, then we want to go to Object, Relations, Make Single User, Object and Data, Selected Objects. So that should work for everything, right? So now if we grab those and we project from view, we should get everything. And we did. So we also need to bring our stand-up targets in separately. So because these need to be animated, we need to set their origin point in a direction so that we can move them along Y. I don't really have to move them all the way to like 0, 0 and center them or anything. I'll do it, but because I'm just moving them along Y, just getting rid of this rotation would be enough. So with that there, and see it's still mapped here. So it's going to use this texture, but its position is different. And then when you bring these into Visual Pinball, you can actually go back to the targets that are actually on layer 4 and look at the rotation amount and just type that in Visual Pinball. And that'll give you exactly the rotation that you want without having to do any guesswork. You know, the whole goal is to do as little fiddling around in Visual Pinball Editor as humanly possible. So anytime you can take coordinates from Blender or rotation information from Blender or whatever, your life is just going to be that much easier. You've already done this stuff once, you know, why do it again? So, all right, that takes care of that. So those targets are out of the way. I'll go ahead and do these next so we can get rid of those. So we'll call this layer 4. We'll go into Visual Pinball. We have a mesh called layer 4. Looks good, layer 4 off, it's visible. It's part of the layer 4 collection so that we get our light state changes. And let's just bring in one of the targets real quick. So it's going to show up here. I'm going to bring it here. And then what did I say? 34.6. So we can just rotate it. And there it is. And now when we animate it in the script, we're just going to send it along its own Y, which is just to push it backwards a little bit. Okay. And then because that needs a texture change as well, we want to make sure it's in the layer 4 collection. And I rendered the reflections for that because the movement's so minimal and the ball's in front of it, so we don't want reflections on for that. Yeah, you know, so there's a huge amount of all of our detail in the game and looking good. Cool. Okay, so small stuff to do yet. Oh, the target looks good. I like it. So we have to bring in our bracket. We need to, I don't know, probably only render some ambient occlusion on the spinner before bringing it in, do our lockdown bar, and then some of our back box elements. So we'll look at doing individual stuff next time.